sound right, boys. Sound right, boys. It sound right, boy.
Olá, pessoal. Boa noite. Eu sou a Jéssica Olinda, eu sou Technical Writer aqui na Zup, do time de Developer Relations. E hoje, o Zup Open Talks, nós vamos falar sobre o futuro da agilidade, para fechar esse mês de comemoração de 20 anos do Manifesto Ágil, né? Mas antes disso, eu quero dar uns recadinhos paroquiais. Vim falar um pouquinho da Zup para vocês, que é uma empresa que está em constante crescimento e nós temos vagas, é isso mesmo. Vocês podem ir lá no site da Zup, que está aparecendo aí no chat para vocês, e ver quais são as vagas abertas. Nós também estamos no Twitch, então segue lá o nosso canal. Já aproveita aqui no YouTube também, segue o canal, ativa o sininho para vocês acompanharem todos os conteúdos que nós temos nas nossas redes sociais, no @ZupInnovation. E nós também tem que falar dos projetos open source. Se vocês ainda não conhecem os projetos da Zup, olha só, os links estão nos comentários também para vocês conhecerem, para vocês contribuírem também. E é isso. Para a gente começar, né, sem mais, eu vou apresentar os meus convidados para vocês. A partir de agora, a nossa transmissão vai ser em inglês. Beleza? Ok, vamos lá. Today we have Dave West, who is a Scrum.org CEO, but he also calls himself the product owner. But we'll talk that about later, okay? And he's an amazing speaker. He's the author of the Nexus framework for scaling Scrum and the head first object-oriented analysis and design books. He also led the development of RUP, which is the Rational Unified Process for IBM. So what a fantastic resume, right? We also have here Ivan Santos. He's in the Agile School and Agile Inc. CEO. He comes a long way with his career as an executive in big companies like Nielsen, Concrete, Accenture. He's also an engineering software professor at Impacta, the Tecnologia College. He's also a PST by Scrum.org, and not to mention the Agile training he's responsible for. So we have an amazing and talented people here. So welcome, guys. It's an honor to have you here. Okay, wait a second.
Hello, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's an honor, guys. Welcome here. How are you
Hello.
Good. In a cold Boston, so I'm good, but a little chilly. Yeah.
What about you, Ivan? How are you doing?
Hello, thank you for inviting me. So I'm so very happy to stay here with you today. And yes, I'm here in Brazil, not in Boston, not in snow, but in the Brazilian summer.
Yes, being Brazilian summer, Brazilian rain as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Okay, so let's get started, okay? So we'll be talking about how agility is going. So we celebrated the 20 years of the Agile Manifesto this month. So let me ask you guys, what is your perspective on agility in companies? Are they changing, or is it still something that only happens within teams?
Maybe I'll start, Ivan. So it's interesting. About, I guess it was 12 years ago, I was the research director at Forrester Research running the app dev practice. And one of the things that we did was a lot of research on the state of Agile. And I remember once I went and did this big talk, this big fancy talk. And I said, Agile is being used by 32% of organizations. And there was a guy in the front row who was probably a tester. He said to me, prove that. And I said, well, we did a comprehensive survey. He goes, prove it. People say they're Agile, but they're not really being Agile. So we did the very deep survey, and we found that the majority of organizations were using Agile at the team level. But the context that team was running in was definitely not very Agile at all. So I coined the term water, scrum, fall to describe that sort of behavior. We're Agile, but we don't plan frequently. We only plan once a year. Oh my God, everybody hates planning, right? So we only do it once a year, but we're Agile. And we don't release very often because our customers don't want it very often. The last thing you want is to have new changes to processes or systems every once in a while. So water, scrum, fall. Water, work Agile, release infrequently, fall. Now, the question is, over the last 8-9 years since we did that survey at Forrester, has that changed? And I'm fortunate that I get to travel, or did travel the world. Now I get to surf the world from here and talk to lots of organizations. And I still see that same characteristic. I think it has got a lot better. I actually think, hate to say this, if there's a silver lining around COVID, one thing that COVID has done is it's meant that long-range planning is not particularly useful. Directional, yes. Provide us a vision, you bet. Give us a goal and a mission, you bet. But we have to plan on a monthly, weekly, quarterly basis. So we're starting to see organizations, and I think the pandemic is the tipping point, move from this industrial model with Scrum and Agile working at the team level to something a lot more comprehensive, where you align teams to customers and outcomes, where you continually respond to their needs rather than build these massive programs and projects that may or may not deliver the value that has been requested. I think that we're in a process of flux and change, and I'm hopeful that the result is going to be that and hopefully the one good thing that comes out of the pandemic is that these organizations realize that the world is complex and it keeps changing. And so we need to move away from this industrial mindset of efficiency and scarcity and risk mitigation to more of a opportunity-based mindset where we have amazing teams aligned to customers delivering value, which at the heart of it is what Agile is all about. Ivan, what do you see? What have you seen? And particularly, I'm interested to hear about Brazil a little bit and some of the situations there.
Yeah. What I see is a new way of working. So companies are looking for a new way of working to get better results. So basically, they are asking us, okay, I have to launch a new digital product, or not only digital products, but I need to get better results. So the way of working that I have today, my current model, is not giving me the to be able to change my behaviors, all the things that I need to develop a new product or to sustain the products in a current market that I have. So new change, new perspectives. So how can I respond to all the change that the market needs? So basically, companies are looking not only for IT perspective, but also for business agility also. So, okay, let's see. I need to develop a new product. So how can I look in an end-to-end perspective, to have all the things involved and basically looking for a purpose and to say why do you need to develop this product? So how can I engage everybody? How can I improve my culture, to develop the best product or services to the market? So it's a new way of working is needed to develop this kind of stuff,
Can I just pick up on that a little bit? Because what I think the catalyst, that though COVID might be the catalyst that finally organizations feel they have to, the catalyst really perhaps was the alignment around customer and the fact that customers, organizations, 20 years ago, obviously before you two were, working many years ago now, organizations were very aligned around themselves. You know what I mean? They were sort of very focused on themselves, which meant that they built these elaborate systems and processes and the like that were aligned to making them super efficient. As they're more aligned to a customer, and the customer, well, they change their minds often. You know what we're like. We, 1 minute we're using, dare I say, StreamYard. The next minute we're using Zoom online. We're awful, aren't we? We're so fickle. I would hate to be serving us. So, and we, the needs change continuously. So because of that, this alignment to customer has driven an acceleration. So the new ways of working, a response to that, the customer is an environment that keeps changing. And I think that is the case. So I'm very, very optimistic about the future because I think that ultimately the result of Agile mindset and this way of working will make environments not only more responsive, more effective in terms of delivering value, but also more human and more enjoyable to work. And I think that's super important as well. We don't want to be doing stuff that's awful. And if we can deliver value to customers in an environment that's good and fun and enjoyable, then I think we're in a good position. So I think that is changing, and I think we are seeing that.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Fingers crossed as well.
Yeah.
And guys, talking about this, what do you think is missing for companies to be actually be agile and not just do agile? What do you guys think it's missing?
Well, can I start this time, Dave?
Yeah, definitely. I do talk a lot, don't I? So yes, sorry.
Less zombie Scrum, less zombie, etc. Can you hear me better now, Jessica? Yeah? Yeah, perfect.
A little bit.
So,
Yeah, it's a little better.
Yeah, thank you. So let's don't be scrum. Let's, I have to do only the tasks that I need to develop for the company, or do I have to understand the why behind, So when we look for the perspective, the why, we have to understand, okay, what's an end-to-end perspective to do the job, to do the work, to improve all the things that we need to get and to provide better service to our customers. So what I see, less on the Scrum, because every time that I visit a company, I see only, I have post-its. Okay, perfect. We have post-its. 3M will love, right? But why do we have post-its behind it? Why do we have the events in the Scrum, for example? So there is a why behind it, right? So we need to understand that we need to have transparency, to understand everything that's happening while we are developing a product, to be able to inspect and adapt what to do, all the work, to develop the product. So every time that I see only post-its, only a tool, I ask, okay, why are you doing that? Do you know why we have a daily Scrum? Do you know why we need to review the product until the end of our sprint review? It's not only to approve the product, but it's also, to collect feedbacks about the product. And this is the main reason to improve the product that we are delivering to our customers, So basically, in my opinion, I don't know, Dave, is less zombie Scrum. Why zombie? Zombie, that is a hurt, arms, a head, but doesn't have a brain that is working, We need to understand the scenario, and get everybody involved to develop the product.
Yeah, zombie Scrum or zombie Agile is something that can be very worrying when people don't have a brain and they just follow everything sort of almost religiously. They sort of follow it without a reason. It's funny, what's missing, I think, ultimately, is that I would agree with you. I think why is the sort of motivation. In fact, funny, I got a sort of funny story. So last time I was in Brazil, the only time, I visited lots of great companies. Ivan showed me to many, made me walk across town because it was faster than driving. And we visited all these really interesting organizations, and they were doing really good Scrum in some ways. But I realized after the sort of second visit, like they had the boards, they had the burn downs, they had velocity, they were even doing some Kanban on top. So they had things like aging and some really cool practices. But I noticed there was something missing from every room that I was in, and that was the mission, the goal, the customer, the personas that they were serving. So I started, in my usual sort of hello British sort of way, asking questions. And I found that many of the teams had very mixed ideas of why they were doing the work. Scrum is really good at doing work, but it's even better when you align it to delivering value. And so when I came back from Brazil, interestingly, I had a conversation with Ken Schwaber, the co-creator of Scrum, and I said, "Oh, yes. Did you love Brazil? How was the food?" We talked about that, and then we moved on too quickly, talking about this observation. And I don't think this was the reason why it was added to the Scrum Guide, but this release of the Scrum Guide that came out in November added product goal. And the reason why, one of the implications of this concept of a product goal being a commitment to the product backlog, is that the why is transparent now. The sort of motivation is transparent. And I think that one of the things that was missing in many organizations and continues to be is this sort of clear alignment of teams to customers, to outcomes, to mission. We talked about this earlier. And yes, that transfers into funding, how things are funded. That transfers into how risk is managed. That transfers into how people are hired. All of this, because ultimately there's the industrial paradigm, or the previous ways of working, were very focused on themselves, not on what they were there to do. People talked about their job in terms of the position in the company, not the value you deliver to the customer. Like, I'm a VP of this particular system or whatever. Well, that's interesting, but what does that system do? Oh, well, it does. It takes like 20 questions to find out exactly where that fits into some sort of value to the customer. And I think that is holding organizations back. We're not the only people that say this. Simon Sinek wrote a book on it. There's a lot of people saying this. I think that the changes to the Scrum Guide hopefully make this more obvious than it was before, because it's easy to think of Scrum just as a backlog of work, pick the top bits, focus on it, and keep going. And I don't think that is the case. And it's certainly something I want to champion, as I see Ivan does as well.
Excellent.
Okay. Do you want to say something?
No, just excellent. I
Thank you.
110% agree with Dave.
Cool. All right. Dave, we know that you are the Scrum.org CEO, but we want to know, why do you like to be called the Scrum.org's PO, actually?
Yeah, it's interesting. And increasingly, I'm not talking about being the PO as much now, I must admit. But the reason why when I joined Scrum.org about almost 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago. Gosh, time flies when you're having fun. Yeah, so 6 years ago, I joined Scrum.org, and the reason why I wanted product owner on my title, not just CEO, was because I wanted to remind people that ultimately the value that I was trying to bring, and the value that I bring to Scrum.org's a community of 350 trainers all around the world. It's, millions of people come to our website every month. We have this huge, but what value do I bring? Now, what I bring is the ultimate value in any organization, which is the definition of what we're trying to do, the definition of the vision for the organization, and that manifests itself into the products that we offer. Now, being the product owner of Scrum.org isn't always great, because one of my biggest stakeholders is Ken Schwaber, the creator of Scrum. Now, surprisingly, Jessica, he has a very strong opinion of where we should be going. And so you can imagine that dynamic, and maybe some of the people that are listening today or watching today appreciate what it's like to be a product owner with people all around them that are very, very strong opinions around what that needs to be in that product. Being a product owner is incredibly hard. It isn't all about the customer. It's about the customer, the business, the regulations, the culture of the organization, the certain things that just don't make sense for certain organizations to deliver, even if they make sense for lots of other reasons. I feel that very, very personally, those challenges, because there's lots of things Scrum.org could do. We have a great opportunity. We have a mission, which isn't about Scrum, which is about helping people and teams solve complex problems. But, managing those constituents, of which Ivan's one of them, one of our trainers, and managing that whole thing is ultimately my responsibility. And that's what I think a great product owner is, sometimes of just one product, and sometimes of an organization that comprises of products. That's what I do, I think.
Yeah.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, totally. It's great. I mean, we have an idea what a PO does, so it's even better now. I mean,
yeah, it's hard though, Jessica. I must admit, one of the challenges for being a PO is the fact that you've got all these different stakeholders that want something or need something, and all of them have good reason. And all of them, I naturally assume that everybody hasn't got some sort of bizarre agenda. So they all come, and you have to spend a lot of time trying to get into their headspace, trying to understand their truth, because I'm sort of an aspiring Buddhist, and I believe that there's no such thing as a truth, but everybody has their own view of it. And so you spend a lot of time trying to get into these truths, and then trying to match those to the actual things that you do. And It's fun, challenging, and I love it.
Yeah, sure. Well, we have a question, all right, from Nelisa Silva. She asking you guys if you think Scrum should be changed according to a project or a customer. She meant according to each customer specification, I think. Specificity.
Yeah.
Yes.
I get it. Ivan, do you want to talk a little bit about a difference between a framework and
Go ahead.
or should I do it? I mean, I'll do it if you want, if your internet's sort of playing. So that's a really good question. Scrum, as defined in the Scrum Guide, which I recommend you look at, is really simple, right? If you want to do Scrum, use that as the basis, but it's a framework. In fact, the recent release of the Scrum Guide, we sort of doubled down on that with like the roles, the word role was removed and it was focused on accountabilities now instead. So the Scrum Master, the product owner, and the developer, we got rid of development team. The idea is you instantiate it in your context. You have to. You know, Scrum honestly hasn't got enough in it for your situation. You know, you never know. You need to, like, how do you define the definition of done? Well, you're going to have to contextualize it. What does the backlog actually look like? Well, is it stories? Is it some other PBIs? Is it defects? Is it aspirations? How do you describe those? How do you measure their success? You know, what form does a daily Scrum have? You know, what form does the daily, what form does the sprint review have? All of this needs to be instantiated in your context. However, there are some things in Scrum that you shouldn't change. Well, you can change them, but you have to understand the implication, and maybe that's not Scrum. For instance, you need to do sprints that are shorter than about a month. You need to ensure that you have a goal, a sprint goal and a product goal. You need to meet daily. You know, those things are really, really important for Scrum to succeed. And before you remove them, and of course, you're all smart people. That's the other power of Scrum, right? It doesn't mean you can't remove them. You're not doing Scrum now, but you need to think about why you're doing all those things. And the reason why you are not doing those things shouldn't be because your customer's telling you that they don't want to do them. It should be that there's a good reason to deliver value by not doing them. So for instance, when your customer says, do I really have to meet every day if we're working with somebody? Or, you know, or do I really have to come to a sprint review? Say, well, no, you don't, but this is why we're doing a sprint review. It gives us an opportunity to inspect and adapt based on the increment, the work we've done, and then feed that into our planning so that we can make sure that we do better and we learn and we improve and we inspect and adapt. If you don't think that you're going to contribute to that, then, well, let's talk about that, because I think you will. And then rather than just removing the event. So I think it's very easy to sort of like, Scrum's failing, let's not do Scrum. But ultimately, it's not Scrum that fails. It's not. It tends to be the situation. So let's work out why and the challenges. And then if it's still true, then maybe we should look at other things. Ivan, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I would like to add perfectly your position about it. And just to add, if you change Scrum, it will not solve the problem. Maybe we will hide the problem, you know. So
that's good.
Basically, that's it. So if you change, why are you changing? If you think about the shuhari, you know, okay, let's do it. So, and let's understand why you are doing it. So if you change the events and everything that we have in Scrum, as Dave said, okay, it's a framework that we have to use, you know, to help us to solve complex problems, so complex situations. Basically, if we change the events and change something in Scrum, probably, based on my experience, we will hide the problem. It will not solve the problem. That's it. That's the issue, you know. So
that's it. I think that's a key point that you raised. One of the great things about Scrum is also one of its most worst things. It's like imagine that you want to lose weight and you want to get fit. What Scrum provides you is a regime that tells you how unfit you are and how heavy you are on at least a daily basis. So it throws it in your face. And in fact, it's worse. It gets stakeholders to come in and see how fat and unfit you are. So it's like inviting your mother-in-law in, you know, to say, you really should be doing better. And you're like, oh my God. So the whole thing is based around that. And that's painful. And so you have to think about those pains and, you know, that, but the benefit of doing those pains is you will get fitter. You will lose weight, and to use it, to overstretch that analogy. And then ultimately you will be more successful, even if initially it is pretty painful.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Yeah, I like it. Okay, Ivan, I have a question for you. You know, regarding Brazil perspective, with your experience in multinational companies, how would you compare the Brazilian agility to the foreign agility?
Great question. So, when I used to travel, not during this pandemic, unfortunately, I had the pleasure to visit a lot of companies outside Brazil. So, I had a training in Silicon Valley, and I had the opportunity to visit some local meetups, visit some companies, and observing all the things that we have there. You know, Brazilians, we are doing a good job here. That's why they are hiring us. You know, there is a lot of Brazilian guys that are moving to other countries around the world. So this is a very good metric that we can observe and say, okay, we are doing a good job here. So sometimes here in Brazil, people say, oh, come on, in US it's very good, it's better than us, you know, in US, in Europe, in etc., and other countries. But here we are facing and overcome a lot of challenges that we are doing here. Thinking about not only in IT, but on IT, but also in business agility as well. And I think, in my opinion, that we are doing a good job. Why? Well, basically, look for the people that are leaving Brazil and working for global companies today, you know. So we are doing a good job.
So I'd like to add, obviously I'd like to add, I'd like to hear my own voice, but the, so I've been thinking a lot about this actually, Jessica, not just about Brazil, but because I used to visit loads of countries. I travel about 120,000 business miles every year. And I'd get to go to Australia and to, you know, Singapore. Next thing I'd be going to India or Turkey or wherever. Not only did I eat lots of great food around the world, but I was very interested about some places, how they looked more successful and how that worked. And I actually agree with Ivan. I think that the Brazil has got a great opportunity. And when I think about it, I tend to think of three reasons why I think Brazil is well placed. I don't think it's uniquely placed. I think there's some other other environments that are also weakly placed compared to the US. I think number one is legacy. The US has been doing this, has been trying, you know, it's got this whole industrial base. They were after the Second World War, they became this powerhouse around and that the culture of that legacy, how organizations are structured, the systems that support them, the way they do business is so ingrained. It was a huge advantage in the 50s and 60s and 70s, but it's becoming less of an advantage now. So I think legacy is one of them. I also think another thing is diversity. When I visited all the Brazilian companies, I was shocked by this shouldn't be shocked, but the number of women, the number of different types of people from different backgrounds, it was just great, amazing diversity in Brazil and experience. And I think culturally there's a lot of diversity there, which I think makes for better Scrum teams. I honestly believe that. I honestly believe that the best Scrum teams, and we've seen that, Google did that big study of best teams, and they found the best teams were diverse, had psychological safety, came from, different points of view. That was important. So I think that's crucial. And the last point, I think, which is really interesting, is the culture of Brazil. There's a family, it's more akin to the sort of agile sort of team human sort of approach you know, you're huggers. That sounds a little bit. If Ken Schreiber was on, he'd be slapping me now, saying we don't talk about that soft stuff. But that you've got that sort of where you have a level of safety, where there's just like you talk about things in front of each other. It's just good. So I think there's a cultural difference. So I'm actually really, I think Brazil's very well positioned. I also think the Netherlands are. I think Turkey is. I think there's a few. For different reasons, there's a few other countries as well, but it's good to see that. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to do some very innovative things over the next 10 to 20 years in Brazil.
Great.
Excellent.
Do you want to say something? Yeah.
No. Go ahead.
No. Oh, okay. That's great. We're glad to hear that we have a lot of this to grow as agilists. So yeah, that's going to be great. But when we say about the Agile Manifesto, it is so tell me, is the agility created 20 years ago the same one we are looking for today? What do you guys think about that?
So the Agile Manifesto, it's funny because I was actually at breakfast with Ken this morning, and Alistair Coburn had sent me a bunch of photos because he hadn't got Ken's email address, and there were photos from Snowbird, and he sent them to me, and I gave them to Ken, and I also was looking through them with him, and we talked briefly about this, and I just want to share his observations. He said, I mean, the world is definitely very different. The Agile Manifesto came out of a response to the needs in software, very software-centric needs. And actually in response, I was the RUP product manager at that moment. And interestingly, Grady Booch, who worked with me, was invited, but said no. To some extent, a lot of the things in the manifesto were anti the RUP model, this sort of not waterfall, but near waterfall kind of approach. So the motivations have definitely changed. The environment that Agile is practiced, even it talked a lot about business agility, has definitely changed. However, when you look at the manifesto's principles, individuals and interactions, working software, maybe that word could be replaced with working products, working value, working outcomes over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan. Other than the word software, all of those 4 principles really hold true today and are incredibly strong. I would argue that now we care more about the outcomes than the software. But apart from that, I think, and then this desire, we're always trying to uncover better ways of working. And I think that is ultimately still true. A lot of people talk about, should we update the Agile Manifesto? Well, it's a manifesto for Agile software development, which is, so it's focused on that today, when it was created. I don't think we need to. I think we're smart enough to take those ideas and apply them in different contexts. They still make sense to me. Ivan, what do you think? Do they make sense in your business context, in your business agility contexts?
Yeah, for sure. And in my perspective, also to add, I think, of course, the Agile Manifesto, when we talk about it, started for software development, and now people are looking for new ways of working, and that's why they created, for example, the HR Manifesto, how can we use a kind of manifesto to another areas in our companies, and I think that's a kind of way that people are looking for, ways to improve the vision on a new way of working in the specific areas, So, in my opinion, that's it.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at those alternate manifestos, and I get invited to review and provide comments on a few of them. And I actually, the cynic in me would say, oh, we don't need to do that. Why, they're just copying our ideas. But actually, I'm the opposite. I like what they're doing because they're contextualizing it. all the feedback I ever give tends to be, hey, let's make sure we don't go, too. Some of them get a little commercial, so they're like really connected to the consultants that are helping drive it. So I try to pull them back from that. But generally, the idea, this is all good information, and those, as you said, these practices, this mindset, this approach to being more agile, to using empiricism, to be continuously improving, to be focused on outcomes, means that you need to think more about the collaboration of people, the outcomes that you're achieving, you shouldn't have these very tight contracts around the work you're doing, but instead you should focus on those outcomes. And then this desire to have the plan rather than continuously respond to, I think it just all makes sense. So I'm really positive about those other manifestos, and intrigued. The ones I don't like are the ones that tend to be so commercial. Because one great thing about this manifesto is, even though it was influenced by XP, Scrum, Crystal, and all, Jim Highsmith brought his stuff, and everybody brought their own stuff, it was very agnostic of those things. And I think that makes it so powerful and makes it so relevant still today.
Cool. We have a question from actually Wesley Gilima. He's talking. He said, "Will the Scrum Guide ever evolve? If so, what do you think can be improved?"
Wesley, where were you last November? Were you just obviously you were busy, probably partying or dancing or something, which is very sensible. There was a new release of the Scrum Guide in November. It's continuously evolving. Now, it does evolve slowly, and I know you're going to say, but I thought you said it has to change every month. Well, some things don't, all right, Wesley? In this particular example, the Scrum Guide has evolved. The add of the product goal, the fundamental taking out of all the software terms, the creation of this idea of commitments, the role stuff, the self-managed versus self-organized, those things have changed. And I think that I don't think it will change every year. In fact, I wouldn't like it to, because my God, the work that's associated with that. And I know you might argue that it's our fault. Our architecture should be better for absorbing change. And maybe you're right there, Wesley. Because, and so many people remember that there's about 750,000 people trained on Scrum. There's about, some say about 12 million people doing Scrum every day, which is a crazy number, right? So because of that, we have to be careful with the change. But I see it change. I see the focus on outcomes, the focus on customers, the focus on value, the focus on empiricism, continuous improvement. They'll continue to get harder and harder. But Scrum itself hasn't changed, but the way it's described and how it's delivered to the world continuously gets refined every release. But go and have a look. Scrumguides.org. Have a look at the guide, Wesley, and there's a great place to make comments if you've got any feedback on the guide.
Okay, guys. One more question for you. When we talk about agility, the focus is on the development oriented to digital products, right? So it's like do you think the production of everything, making everything a product, is a solution? I mean,
well, that's a hard one. Ivan, do you want to start, or?
Yeah, I can start. Yeah, for sure. And it's a hard one.
That's the reason why I said you should start. I got to think about that one.
Okay. So basically, when we are developing products, as we said, we think, what's the best way to develop a new product or to sustain products? But when we talk about service, when we talk about new areas of, complex domain that we need to develop something, right? So I visited some customers around Brazil, and they are looking for new ways of working. For example, to develop to develop something that will satisfy the customer, the end point, in the end perspective, you know. So I think that to develop a product, you will have a lot of ways to do it. But when we talk about digital products, for example, you have a lot of frameworks, you have another practices that you can use, but using to develop something that you don't have a framework, okay, what can I have? What can I use? Maybe you have to develop a new way of working for your company. Maybe you have to look for another perspective. So this is I have in mind when you ask me this kind of question.
So it's interesting because Scrum's used by a large petrochemical company in Africa on the rigs. You know, they have these oil rigs, and they use it to manage the. So every time they notice something that isn't on the spec, meaning, oh my God, look, there's a handle there that's not quite as tight, or you have these changes that you need, and to make sure the safety of the rig is running. And some of them are high priority and some are low priority. Some have immediate value, some have longer term value, some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller. And so they use Scrum. The product owner is the head of safety on the oil rig, and they use the backlog and they manage it. And I had an interesting conversation with the guy that coached them. So not the team in Angola, in Africa, but the guys that coached them. I said, so how does product work with these people? You know, it's an odd word to use to describe an oil rig safety system. And he goes, you know, it doesn't really matter. But he said the reason why he liked it, and you know, the definition, he says it provided a boundary. This is what we're doing. This is the boundary of it. This is the work we're doing, the increments of change that we deliver to this thing. Isn't this thing over here, it's this thing. In this case, it's the safety systems of the oil rig. So the systems of the oil rig, right? It's not talking about oil going in and out. It's not talking about HR. It's just this safety system. We understand the value. You know, we have a measure around safety incidents. We understand the stakeholders. It has well-defined users or customers, and it could, you know, and it's a capability. So we like the construct. Previously, we didn't really have a construct. We just ran projects, and they didn't have a customer. They didn't have a boundary. They had a document, but it was just, and we had all these different projects coming in for the safety systems. And what we've found is by aligning it around this thing, the oil rig safety systems, it's actually liberated us from having to create a project for each thing that we're doing. And they found it very liberating. I think it can get confusing because of the word, because, you know, I'm not in a product business, but I think increasingly with product platforms and the like, we're going to start to think more in terms of the product or service. I mean, they're sort of synonyms. And we're starting to think more about that because it gives us that container to think about it. But it's a really, really good question. Yeah, it is a good question. It's definitely not going to change in the guide. It's definitely how we orient, and I think it does add value and provide that abstraction.
I remember a business case now when you asked me, Jessica, and there is a company that hired a team basically to reduce the taxes that they are paying here in Brazil. So basically, they are involving people from legal, people from tax tributes, you know, and okay, we need to increase our EBITDA. Okay, let's improve how. Okay, let's discover what's going on in our company, you know, and the product, it's not a product, you know, it's the outcome. Basically, okay, let's reduce the taxes that we are paying because there is a lot of ways that we can optimize the process, you know, and basically they formed a team involving different areas, you know, having a kind of sprint goal, you know, top goal to reduce the taxes that they are paying, you know.
But they had a boundary, so they understood what their domain was. They understood who their customer was. They understood the value they were trying to achieve, manifest in the product goal, and then they build a backlog around that. So it works. And yeah, you can argue about semantics, but as an idea, it's a really good construct. And I don't see a better thing. Otherwise, you'd have this sort of like endeavor. Well, no, because that sounds too finite, right? It's just the product exists until it does not exist, you know, and that I think it's a good construct.
Nice. Guys, we have another question here from Star Dodge, I guess her name, he or her name is. It is true that story points were created in XP as a way to mask working days. And did Scrum make this a complex and endless discussion between complexity and effort?
Yeah, that's a really hard question. So I'm not sure to mask working days, but to provide a mechanism, a unit of sort of calculation that was not directly dependent on working days. And I think that the guys, I'm not an XP expert, but built it because they needed a mechanism that sort of like lived outside of the plan domain. But the endless discussion between complexity and effort. Well, the Mythical Man Month, basically by that classic seminal work in the software industry, sort of highlights the fact that there isn't a direct correlation between those two. You know, it has that classic thing at the start that says if 10 developers took a week to build X, how long would 100 developers take? And the answer is 2 weeks. So there is that big mess. In fact, Scrum now has really backed away from providing any real direct guidance on how you estimate or plan, other than that you have to understand size, because you have to have some sizing. Story points maybe give us a relative sizing, which is incredibly valuable. But also the no estimates model also works really, really nicely. I think that we have to, ultimately what we're trying to do when we do estimation and we do planning is work out how much effort it is, so we could decide if it's worth doing, when we should do it, how, relative position. Those things are still continue to be important. The techniques, I think, are less important and very contextual depending on your situation. Ivan, what's your experience, Ivan, with story points and complexity?
Well, basically people love, to convert in hours. Okay, one story point, 1 hour or something. Oh, come on.
Yeah.
That's not the goal. This is not why we are doing this, Basically, let's have a common sense what we need to develop. Okay, do you observe something that we didn't observe to develop a work, to start a work and start to finish, So this is basically my experience. This is one thing that I have in mind when they say, okay, let's discuss about the story points. Okay, let's pressure the team. Okay, let's increase the points. Okay, let's a regular bar, we have to measure. If you are looking ways to measure something, okay, let's try to figure out, measure some kind of methods like width, throughput, and other metrics that we can have, for example, using Scrum with Kanban. It's a very good way to understand some behavior that's happening during our cycle of development. So when we start about to discuss about the story point, comes in my mind this kind of this situation, and sometimes we need to avoid and try to understand the point of view of the people, and to teach and to give some experience why we're using story points. But now we have a lot of new ways, to work and use in our daily basis to develop the job.
Yeah, so the use of story points to measure productivity is awful. I mean, it just ends up shooting yourself in the foot. If you tell me that this team's more productive than this other one, then I'm going to realign how many points I make each piece of work. You know, it's like when IBM decided to pay people by lines of code. You know, people were like, I'm going to build myself a minivan or a boat, you know, because they would just write a lot of code. So it ends up shooting the people in their own feet, you know. So productivity measures should never. In fact, I don't see the value of productivity measures. I see the value of outcome-based measures like evidence-based management. I see the, you know, in terms of estimation and planning, I love one-piece flow and those, you know, single sizing and all of that new stuff that's coming out of the Kanban world, which works brilliantly with Scrum and encourages us to sort of like start thinking less about, oh my God, this is huge, this is small, oh my God, I need to give it a massive estimate because I don't know anything about it, and more sort of like right-sizing everything as we bring it through our system to deliver value. And then we ought to, the other thing that's interesting is we need to empower teams to be able to do the least amount of effort to get the most amount of value. You know, that's the most important thing. I don't mind if people are unproductive, but loads of value is being delivered. I do mind if no value is being delivered. I hate it when organizations, you go and this is what I used to do when I was at Forrester, you'd visit these organizations, the PMO, and everything was green. And then I go and talk to the business and they'd say, it's a disaster, we can't get anything out. But the teams are working, they're efficient, they're quality, but they just don't deliver anything because all the measures are aimed inside the box, not outside the box. So if we could focus on putting measures in place that incentivize us to deliver customer value and business value, then I think we'd be in a much better position.
That's true. Okay, guys, we're heading to the end right now, and I have a last question to wrap it up. In your point of view, what is the prognosis for agility? I mean, to finish our conversation here.
You start, Ivan. I've been talking far too much.
We are just starting, so we have a lot of things to do, you know. We are talking about 20 years, 25 years from now. We have a lot of things to do, many kind of products that are developing in a complex world. So if you look to the market, what do we have now? A lot of complex products. So we need to improve our way of working in by year or each 2 years. I don't know, as the Scrum Guide had last update last year, you know, but we need to improve our way of working. So we will discover new things, new practices. I think that we will not stop. We are just starting. That's my opinion.
Yeah, just to sort of riff on that, we live in a world that's got a lot of challenges. I think COVID uncovered many of them. We highlighted the fact that we have a vaccine now that can stop COVID in its tracks, but why is over 1,000 people dying every day in America? We've known that this vaccine's coming for over a year now, you know, but we still have an inability to practice, to basically to have a problem and then everybody get behind it and solve it. I see the world has got a lot of problems, a lot of challenges, but I also see that we're now slowly changing to respond. The Broad Institute, which they're famous for mapping the human genome, blah, 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 whatever, but they also are a big Scrum shop. They built a COVID test lab because they needed to in March last year in 5 days. 5 days. Because they needed to get a scientist and they wanted to help their local community because, like everything, when the government was a bit slow to put testing labs in. We can do anything. Humans are amazing. They're amazingly destructive and they're amazingly positive. You know, we can change the world. And I think agile working ways of working, these principles are going to continue to become more and more a natural part of every organization. And the organizations that don't will die. And, you know, we've proven that the average tenure of a large company, on the main stock boards in America used to be 60 years. Now it's less than 12, you know. We'll see that level of change happening. And the new guard will be more agile. They'll be more like Amazon. They'll be more like Tesla. They'll be more like SpaceX. They'll be more like, these sort of like aspirational sort of companies that we look at. I think we're about to move into this new way of working and new organizations. And I'm really excited to be part of it. Hopefully I'll get to sample some of it before I retire and get too old to enjoy it. And I think that countries like Brazil are going to be in the thick of it, adding to those best practices and improving the way we work and delivering more value to humanity and to the world. So I think it's going to be a good future.
That's great. Wow, guys, this is amazing. It was really good. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation to come here and talk to us about agility and this. How is it going? Thank you so much. Do you guys want to say anything, like comment or anything about, I don't know, your projects? What are you working on to wrap it up, right?
No, not really. I just want to say thank you. I am looking forward to coming back to Brazil in person soon.
That's great.
One day, hey, and stay in touch. Come to scrum.org. Send LinkedIn, emails, Twitter. I think we're a part of this movement, so be part of it and help me change the world with everybody, people like Ivan, and maybe you as well, Jessica, when you get back to being a Scrum Master again.
Yeah, sure.
Let's go back to the journey to become a PSM3, okay?
Yes, guys, I'm totally just, hype up now to really come back.
Yeah.
We need you. The world needs you.
That's great to hear, even from you guys. That's amazing.
So I would like to thank you for inviting me for this session. And I'm very happy to be here. So basically, we have an event here in Brazil, Scrum Day. On the last session, last year, we had more than 7,000 attendees. So, of course, that we had to host this event online, but I think that this year will be also online. It's a very good way, to improve your skills, your abilities when you talk about agility, when we talk about Scrum, Kanban, other agile practices also. And of course, let's keep in touch. You can mail me, find me on LinkedIn or whatever. And of course, we will be able to help you here, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who's watching us. Thank you. See you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.